With that being said, let's go ahead and introduce our panel of experts. So we got Dallas Cotham, who's a PhD. He is the president of Master Plan, which is a Millrose company based in Dallas, Texas. He's part of the Millrose family of companies. Dallas is an expert in zoning and multifamily projects. He brings an extensive experience and frequently advises clients on municipal requirements. Dallas has a master's and a PhD from TCU and completed a postdoctoral fellowship at West Point. For 15 years, he's been a monthly respondent for the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas Market Sector Outlook. Dallas is also a columnist for the Dallas Morning News, often writing on real estate and housing, and recently received a George Washington Medal of Freedom Foundation for his body of work. We're also pleased to welcome Kimberly Byram, Managing Principal of Multifamily at Zonda. With over 30 years of experience in multifamily real estate development, Kimberly is a leading expert in market fundamentals, pro forma rental rates, and transit-oriented developments. So let's go over our learning objectives today. By the end of this session, we'd hope that all the participants would be able to identify and analyze the latest trends and challenges in the multifamily residential market. We'd like for you to be able to understand the current market climate and apply effective strategies for navigating the market today. And additionally, participants will also learn how Millrose supports the various services and stages of your business process to enhance your operational efficiency and market success. Now, a brief introduction to Millrose and why we do what we do. Millrose manages risk for our clients that have a significant financial implications, such as cost overruns, penalties, lost revenues, etc., for the owner and key project stakeholders. Successful projects require teammate collaboration and effective communication. And as many of you are aware, the industry relies on partners who bring knowledge and capabilities to create and ultimately deliver value to the end user, client, or the owners. The DNA of our organization has a combination of licensed professionals and industry experts and leaders who have been creating and delivering value to our clients in all 50 states. We are uniquely positioned to provide professional services such as permitting, code consulting, local law compliance related services, and building envelopes and energy related services across various markets across the country. With this team of companies, we successfully manage permitting for projects in all 50 states, expanding our multifamily work across various markets and project types, from luxury high-rises in dense urban core areas to affordable housing developments in emerging suburban markets. Our team brings decades of experience navigating the unique zoning and permitting challenges that family projects present. Now, let me hand this over to Kimberly, and she's going to walk us through some of the details of the market challenges.
Well, thank you, John and Dallas, for having me. I've enjoyed working with you both over the years and look forward to a very fruitful time over the next few. So probably first and foremost in my job in working with developers across the country, the number one question that I'm being asked now is, Kimberly, when did the deliveries stop and when should I deliver into the gap? And so what I'm illustrating here for you right now are the number of multifamily deliveries going back to 2002. And I love this historical perspective because it really gives you an idea of where we've been and what we've been achieving recently. If you go to National Multi-Housing Council's benchmark report where they talk about how much multifamily needs to be delivered in order to meet the needs of the growing demographics and also just to stabilize the market, you'll see their conclusions fall at around that 300,000 units per year mark. So if you use that as your benchmark, you see that we were hitting those numbers in that 2012 to 2019 period, kind of bumping around in that 300,000 unit range. But as we hit the pandemic, we have surged into over 500,000. We have what I like to call two cat ears, one that we're currently living through, which is the second quarter of 2024. The deliveries are very strong currently. And then we're going to have a little bit of a reprieve. And then we have another surge in deliveries deliveries coming in the second quarter of 2025 that we will need to work through. But then after that, we really do fall off a cliff. And depending on what numbers you look at and construction starts, you see that we really fall below that 300,000 unit benchmark number by the first quarter of 2027 per my information. Another important point to make is prior to the pandemic, when we were doing that 300,000 per year, we would typically deliver about 50% of the units that were under construction in any one year. So for instance, if 500,000 units were under construction, we would deliver half of those in a year and half of those in the year following. During the pandemic, with the pipeline, the shutdowns and the slowdowns and the lockdowns, that number went from 50% closer to 30%. So some of this surge is in fact a result of just that the units that were already under construction, but what slipped quite a bit, are also entering the market along with what was already planned to come into the market. So next slide. This is, and I know I'm going to have Dallas jump in here and give his expert opinion, but what I've done here is, as you can see, I've started today and I've added a 12-month pre-development time period. And Dallas would probably say it's longer for towers. But overall, assuming 12 months in pre-development and then tacking on then the number of months under construction for each of the different project types, you will see that every one of the different product types now, if you started in pre-development today, would in fact be delivering and completing after that gap that we've identified as the first quarter of 2007. Probably most importantly, of course, we always use garden style as kind of, that's the most delivered product type and the one that we understand the most. But when you go down and you look at, for instance, cottage style, which is a newer product that's been entering the market, or even townhomes in BTR, I wanted to note that those are usually smaller project sizes, somewhere in that 150 to 170 unit range, but they take just as long with pre-development and construction as a garden style does. So Dallas, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing the same thing we saw back when you and I worked on things during the Great Recession. That if you go back one, if you look at the previous slide, you see this hockey stick effect that happened after the Great Recession is that people waited too long to start projects and they didn't get into that gap fast enough. And so we're really, like Kimberly was saying, that if you're starting a project now, you're delivering at the right time. And the people that did this during the Great Recession, the first movers were the big winners. Mm-hmm. So really, I know, having multifamily been my biggest practice area along with self-storage for zoning, this is not the best multifamily period. But we should start feeling much better. And I know the last two reports I did on the Federal Reserve, I'm increasingly optimistic because there are some early movers that are starting to act on things, and they have a little longer time period for hard zoning cases.
Very true. Very true. So flipping one more slide in. So let's talk about where we were and where we're going. I always love to provide a long perspective. Sometimes I take the chart back to 1991 because that was the year I graduated from college. But in this case, I go back to 2001. So probably most importantly for me is that during that great financial crisis year, that was our low watermark. That was a low watermark in terms of demand for sure and what was going on economically. And you can see when the demand fell out from under the multifamily market, the lowest that we got at a national level was 92.1%. So using that as kind of my guide, obviously we are in a different time. While the Fed has had an extended higher for longer period to fight our inflation numbers, we are seeing that working. And so going forward, what can we expect? So in my forecast, I have factored in a soft landing, and that is actually a consensus of 10 different national forecasters. So as we know in economic forecasting, the more averages you take, the better you're going to hit your numbers. So I've got 10 different opinions on where they think the economy is going built into my numbers. And of course, my pipeline as I illustrated in the chart previous. So a couple things here. Obviously, the 92.1 is how low can we go potentially. But then I also like to point out 2012 to 2019, which is a period that I call that macro stable period. During that time period, the 10-year treasury was bumping between 2 and 3%. Occupancy was running at about 94.5. We were all having a great time. And if you were a broker, you probably had a really nice deer lease. And so everything was going great for you. And if you recall, and Dallas and I talked about this the other day, when we were at the end of 2019, it was really a where are we going to go from here? We weren't sure where the economy was headed. We were sitting, if you see here, at a pretty strong all-time high occupancy level, nearing that 95% range. And of course, then the pandemic hit. And, since that time, we've really had all of our economic indicators go haywire and go way against what, 30-year averages have hit. Occupancy in my lifetime, I had not seen 97.4 anywhere but Los Angeles. And of course, so the whole nation actually on average hit 97.4 during the peak of the pandemic. Underlying that was very strong renewal rates, which I'm not showing you, but those are still at pretty all-time highs in most of the markets that we're in. Since the Fed began their combat against inflation, we have dropped back to a more normalized 94.2% in terms of our national occupancy. Going forward, again, really facing that pipeline and somewhat of a softening in the labor market, we expect our occupancies to fall nowhere near the great financial crisis, but definitely start that shape will be down, and then we'll be jumping back up into that 93.5. We'd certainly like to be at 94.5, but we'll take 93.5 over 92.1 any day. And I do not have 2027 and 2028 on this chart yet because there's still a lot of uncertainty in terms of where the pipeline is headed. And so we're watching that in order to help our models be more aggressive and really understand where we're headed in that 27-28 time period. Next slide. So what does that mean for rent growth? And this is asking rent growth. And this is important to me and my clients because this is what pro forma rents are based on, is asking rent. So if I'm walking around in the market today and I'm looking what rents are being quoted to me. So how are these rents increasing and decreasing? That's not rent rolls. That's not renewals. This is sticker price rent as I'm walking around in the market. And as you can see, for the most part, we've had a pretty good run other than the great financial crisis when rents actually declined, asking rents about 2.5%. Again, kind of drawing your attention to that macro stable period where we were bumping around in that 2 to 3%. 14 and 15 were actually strong years, 5 and 6% asking rent growth, but then falling back down again. And that 2019 period when we didn't know where we were headed, about 4.2% growth. And then in 20, a little flat or a little negative. We went down a bit. And then, of course, as along with all of the other things, including the price of bread and milk and pita chips that went up, so did rent. And that went up on average about 14.9%. There are some markets like Phoenix that saw 23% rent jump numbers. But for the most part, we were, on average about 14.9%. 2022, we did come down. We are still positive. The rate of change has come down dramatically as of the end of 2023. And we are expecting to eke out maybe a little bit of rent growth. I know the last shelter costs numbers still show it is a lagging indicator of what's going on inflation wise in terms of what those rents may be doing. But going forward, we are expecting with the pipeline coming into the market for asking rents to fall, not substantially overall, but there will definitely be pockets of markets where we will see, and certainly places like Austin, where there is a lot of pipeline, we've started to see some pretty big asking rent adjustments in those markets. So finally, just want to jump quickly into the markets and hand it over to Dallas. This is my market watch list in terms of what's being delivered and what's being absorbed. And so these are the popular kids. And this is no surprise. These are the smile states with Dallas at the top of that, and not Dallas Colthorne, but Dallas, Texas. And you also see there that is not Fort Worth included. So if you add Fort Worth to that chart, which is usually why I don't put San Francisco on charts, it makes them look so bad. But Dallas and Fort Worth together would really make the rest of the markets look kind of sleepy. these days. But overall, we are seeing very strong absorption, which is good news. A lot of competition and some concessions for sure. And of course, those asking rents being adjusted downwards. But we are seeing that the new product is being absorbed in the markets.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting slide, Kimberly, and thank you. We've collaborated on deals for I don't know many years because I'm focused on trying to help people, neighbors change their minds and politicians change their mind and accept zoning. And that's a forward-looking thing. And Kimberly's always trying to forecast into the future. And I think that's really what the webinar is about, is trying to look into the future. And if you look at this, the cool kids, as Kimberly calls them, there's 5 in Texas and 4 in Florida. There's even more money going to Florida right now than into Texas. So, these are places that there are still opportunities, because like we talked about, if you're looking at today, you're not delivering product for a long time. I mean, you have time for a year-long zoning case, and a lot of these jurisdictions require that. But the Carolinas are a good market. Really all the SEC places are maybe not as big areas, but also good. Nashville, there are plenty of opportunities for value add. And I always will believe sites that are already entitled for multifamily, there's no bargain in that. Developers that go out and fight out a zoning case are immediately adding to the profitability of their project by fighting through that. So, we're seeing people taking that on because they have a little more time and a little more ability to do it. Maybe they haven't raised all their equity. They don't have all their capital stack figured out. But if there's no zoning, there's no project. Okay, so next, this is largely my life, and probably if you're a developer, it's your life. This is actually one of our projects where people showed up and were opposed to a multifamily project, and you can usually be assured that it's mostly boomers or older that don't want any change, which I always find a great irony. These were the people of Woodstock and all sorts of social change, and now they only want to go to the same 5 restaurants. They don't want any change in their life. So, so I often ask, this question, and I've asked it several times. I mean, I write about housing and real estate all the time, and in my morning news columns. And one of the things I think that's interesting is how can people both know that there is an affordability crisis and a housing shortage, and then they accept that, and they know that's a real thing, and then they're opposed to it. And the answer is, all zoning cases should go somewhere else. Largely we're charged with at Master Plan and the Millrose companies of making somewhere else come to you instead of waiting for it. And so, I think the multifamily world has to be tied sort of holistically to the single family world and what's going into it. So again, this is a good time to ask for a zoning case. There's some bullets there you can look at later about that boomers are tying up a lot of housing, and this is a slide that requires some studying. But I think that right now, if you're a young person, this is not the American dream. The reality is the oldest millennials are now approaching 40 years of age, and only 60% or so have reached homeowner status. So compare that to, silent generation, 74% had, and for boomers in Gen X, that number was 68%. So that's certainly hard. I mean, the fortunate millennials who own homes report that 80% of those have gotten help from their parents to do so. So the American dream's different. And so, all right, well, that's all good information, but what does that mean in the multifamily world? It means that we've got 16 years of at least 4 million people that are going to be entering the market every year. And Kimberly and I both think that's what people ought to be thinking about, is not, okay, property prices are high and construction costs are high and interest rates are high. Those are all facts. But so too this is an important fact. There are a lot of people constrained from buying a home that want to enter the market. Kimberly, you want to jump in on it?
I love this. I think I think 16 years of runway is the first point. The average age of the first-time home buyer is now 35. And so that really kind of puts a divide in that millennial cohort with the older millennials that have been able to buy homes, but the younger millennials that cannot. And I've got that little gray box around that really large number of people each year. And to me, I think, from a housing perspective, BTR is a great
Yeah.
opportunity for that group of millennials who are getting married and maybe having a children or pretending children with a dog and need that yard. I think that product type has really come into its own, and it's interesting for that particular product type. I also have the Gen Xers and the youngest boomers in that gray box as well, because we're trying to get them out of their homes. They are empty nesters. I'm about to be one. I don't want to cut the tree down in my front yard, but I had to this year. Didn't like doing that, didn't like getting my new roof, and I'm ready to move on to something else. And I'm not ready for seniors housing yet. And then you've got that last box there, which is the boomers. That is the silver tsunami. And that is that active adult product. And then going on into, if necessary, hopefully not, because everybody's going to live forever and stay in their active adult or their downsize or high rise that we're doing a lot of in Texas.
Yeah, I just think generational change is such a driver in real estate. And, we just see that in 2010, the first time home buyer was 50% of the market. And last year it was just barely over a quarter of the market. So those are all strong signs for the multifamily world. And I do think, we're seeing the BTR or the cottage that are fewer units, and also people that are willing to do less than the kind of institutional 300 units. Mm-hmm. Those don't face the same kind of headwinds from a neighborhood opposition. And it's much harder for those groups to say, oh, you're doing 150 units. It's harder for them to come back and say, oh, it's too big, it's too much traffic, all the kind of standard things. We're trying to address affordability and a housing shortage, and you can have some success there. Okay, so we're working all across the country now, and I think that Kimberly is too. Texas has been something of a laboratory since the Great Recession. You gain so many people. So the lessons we learned by working in Texas are applicable for any of these other things. And doing zone cases in Orlando or Nashville or wherever it is, they're very simple. So I think the laboratory we worked on here really worked. Like, we've transformed our business. We have a separate group of people that all they do is community engagement. People expect a lot more transparency and a lot more hand holding, and we can do that. We've gotten good at doing it. So that being said, the numbers are still strong. Texas is going to be, by 2050, the largest state in the union, and not just in our minds, but actually in real population. And by 2100, the numbers say that DFW will be the largest metropolitan area. Now, these are all studies and projections, but it is happening, and there's been rapid change here, and in other places. But I think you also see right now cities are having to grapple with, they don't have COVID money. Sales taxes may be flat, maybe property taxes in some places even waning. And they're going to, in this year and the next year, they're going to have to look at, how do we find more tax? And that's these large 30 to 50, $100 million multifamily projects actually solve a lot of their problems. It provides us housing options, it addresses affordability, and it adds to the tax base. So that's a good climate, and we saw that. And because there's been a little interlude here where you don't have as many zoning cases, you get more favorable wins, and there's not as much fatigue on the neighborhood or opposition side. So those are all good. I think, here's a case we did for Toll Brothers, and you can study the slide later. I mean, this was extensive neighborhood work. If you can just tell from that little rendering, it's the tallest building in that micro area, but it got approved. And it's because we understand, the P in planning is for politics. You've got to work the neighborhood. You got to work the neighbors. You have to have a really good ground game. In this case, we delivered a great product in a key location. that's going to be that is already very successful. And here are other ones, Milrose companies that worked on, kind of across the country, and it's every kind of product type from student housing to luxury towers and everything in between those. And Kimberly's doing the same thing. I mean, it's not that they're all the same, but they are similar. Okay. I think that the biggest thing the Milrose companies add as a value that's a very affordable service is permitting timelines. I've done this 20 plus years, and clients tend to think in timelines. How long is this going to take? The number one problem they have is how long are they stuck at what I call month zero of moving the project forward and actually starting the clock. But on the back end, the permitting, people seem to think of this as, oh, it's about the same in every jurisdiction. It's not. It's very different in what the rule book is. And Milrose, as a family of companies, has gotten really good at each of these distinct phases of, organizing the project, submitting accurately electronically, but also being good at the human side of the equation. And the fact that we're the only company working nationwide, we're able to do this at an expert level. Expediting is one thing, expertiting is another thing. And we really hire experts that understand and drive projects to the finish line. This is a complicated slide in terms of there's a lot going on, but if you're a developer, there is a lot going on. And you have to decide how many of these things do you want to do yourself, and how many things do you want to have other people help you to do that are expert in that field. Milrose is a private equity roll-up of a lot of expert companies across the board. I'm an expert on zoning. I don't know about special inspections, but my colleagues do. All of these thoughts have to be taken specifically, just like Kimberly. Kimberly is in the study the market phase. And we have to understand all those things in this customer journey. And so I think for many people, they're at the first part of this and where the economy is. But they need to recognize that all these are interrelated. And we've tried to develop a family of companies that can, regardless of location, guide somebody through the system with a variety of experts. And avoid time delay. Kimberly, don't you think that's the biggest problem we see in projects is unexpected delay?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, one of the things I was going to point out, and I love this, I actually took a picture of it, is that everything's working simultaneously. We're all charging the hill at the same time, all of these things. It's not like this happens and then this happens. We want all of this to be happening so that it comes out beautifully together so that construction starts. So a lot of things there's a lot of boxes before construction. Find the money right now for us. We support that process. And that's probably right now where a lot of our clients are stuck is, I've got to find that. And they probably found the site and they're kind of working those three boxes together, but they're doing that while they're working through the rest of the scenario as well, because the deal will change over time as well as they present it to the equity players and the banking and debt players.
We're working in those three boxes on what I call the holy trinity of due diligence. How likely are you to win? How long will it take to win? What's the light? How long, and how much? Those are the three things that impact zoning cases, and you have to do that homework. And sometimes you have to do it on a lot of sites, particularly when deals are very thin, because we need to win for sure. Because there's not money for drilling dry holes right now, if there ever was. John, you want to wrap us up?
Yep. Yeah. As Dallas and Kimberly were talking about, finding the right partner who understands your unique challenges is essential, right? And when you're trying to figure out where to build, how to build, and the entire process, that's where we have the experts that along the way that can help you out. Some of the things, we've actually done zoning, permitting, and code consulting in all 50 states. We offer special inspections, fire services, local law compliance, violation removal, and we even have a forensic architectural and engineering services who specialize in existing buildings. So we actually bring a lot to the table. Every situation is kind of unique, and we try to seek your individual challenges and be able to marry up our services to give you the service that you need. So next slide. So as Kimberly and Dallas kind of highlighted throughout today's program, there's lots of opportunities for success. When you're looking at the various market opportunities, that are out there to encourage development, there are a couple things that are happening today. They're offering density bonuses and height bonuses. So entitlements, are getting easier to help developers build affordable housing projects. So lower interest rates, has kind of sparked a growth period here. There's a need for more affordable housing, which is driving the market. A lot of people have been waiting on the sidelines, to get engaged. But what we're also seeing is outside of that list that was shared, even in some of the secondary markets, there's a lot of attractive opportunities there where things have not been built up yet. We as Millrose can help you assist with the pre-planning, because we know that if deadlines aren't being met with the pre-planning, funding can go away. So if funding goes away, it kind of puts the whole project in jeopardy. We can also assist with the infrastructure assessment, to understand what those requirements are, what the critical components are, what's involved with that. What are the utilities like? Are there enough fire hydrants available? Are there mature trees and things like that that may impact the project? There's a whole lot of different factors that can slow a project down or stall a project. We can help you identify what those are up front. We can help address those issues before they become a problem. And so with that, let's move to the Q&A portion of our presentation. So bear with me one second here. We have a few questions that have popped up. First question, what types of incentives have you found most beneficial or challenging when it comes to multifamily projects? And how do you recommend navigating these complex opportunities?
Yes, I think we're talking about how deals pencil. And so probably the most important thing in how deals pencil is the pro forma rents. And as we work with our developers and work with people to shore up their investment opportunities, we're trying to help them understand where the market is today. And then, of course, a lot of the equity providers and a lot of the banks are not allowing for rent growth to opening. And so, of course, the faster that you can expedite that and get there and hit that gap, you will be able to meet and exceed those pro forma numbers potentially. Construction costs are coming down and somewhat. But that's just one little, that moves the needle on the pro forma quite a bit. And then finally, we'd really like to see more transactions on the multifamily side. And hopefully with these interest rates coming down and the federal funds rate coming down, we will begin to see more transactions occurring. And that's important even for the development community, because in order to underwrite and to understand the future, we need to know where cap rates are, and we need to know that by transaction. So overall, I think that what we're trying to do is help our clients get their deals to pencil.
Kimberly, you bring up that rent thing. I've called you many times and asked you, where's the rent going to be? Mm-hmm. And it matters for the zoning, because that's the number we use often to show neighbors that these are people that really are renting by choice. Right. They buy a home, and we show them, and we can kind of extrapolate out who these people are, how much money they make. And it helps to tell a human story. I mean, when somebody says $2.15 rents, if you're not in this business, you don't really know what that means. But if you can then equate that to, who it is, or if it's a more affordable project, this is a firefighter and a school teacher. And why is it okay for these people to serve your kids and the community and not live there too? So, I know you really help us humanize what that is. And facts are not very interesting, but storytelling is good. And that helps present a good zoning case.
Absolutely.
Nobody's really compelled by a lecture on what rents are, but they do care about, oh, okay, well, I had thought about that. Yeah, maybe we need to have something that teachers and nurses and people like that can afford to live in.
Yeah, there's a lot of new product, and that's probably one of the things that the pandemic has changed is there have been a lot of new different products going back to that housing continuum that are starting to enter the market, the BTR stuff, the cottage style stuff. These were not things that were done 4 or 5 years ago, and they're really entering the market. Now we're starting to see attainable housing. With different branding, and some of the big multifamily developers are getting into that space, and those are exactly what you're saying. They're small A affordable, so they're still targeting 80% to 100% AMI, so that's a $1,500 rent check. But that is for that teacher or that firefighter, that person that needs to live in the community in order to serve the community. And so those are all new product types that we didn't have 5 years ago.
And it addresses some of the anxiety or complaints people have about, oh, we have too much garden style, or what I call zoning fatigue. When you get too much of a particular product type, people tune out. We're having that problem. We had it with self storage a while ago. Right now, currently, we're having this with car washes. There's too many. Well, the market says there's not, but people don't respond always to the way things really are. I mean, we joke in the zoning world that when we have a neighborhood meeting, we invite property owners to meetings, and unfortunately, people show up. And they do so after a bad day of work or an argument with a spouse and with a lot of anecdotal opinion. And that's why it does take this team of experts so that I can call Kimberly and be able to understand better who is going to live here. Who do you really think is going to live here? What's the age? Why does all of this matter? Good question. Thank you.
So kind of along that, we also have another question here. So how are resident preferences in the multifamily space transforming? Are there specific lifestyle trends such as co-living or remote work that developers need to consider?
Can I jump in first?
Go ahead.
Well, the biggest thing, Kimberly and I know this because we're similar age and have kids the same age. The experience of young people at colleges now is so different than if you graduated college in the 90s, say, or even 2000s. Kids don't really live in the dorm anymore. There's a lot of student housing that's quite good, or even if you look at your tier one schools, they have had to rethink what is their customer experience, what is the parent expectation. And so you have kids getting out of college that they're not going to go and have their first job. They're not going to go down in terms of what their expectation for living is. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's been a big change, is the right out of school person that might have lived in not a very good garden style product. I just don't believe that happens anymore.
Yeah, the urban, during the pandemic, we did see people flee to the suburbs, and we're seeing that kind of shift and come back. But what's changing in a lot of, certainly the Texas markets, but a lot of the high-rise markets, is we're shifting from building luxury high-rises for young professionals, and we're trying to move those baby boomers and those Gen Xers out of their homes by providing them a very high level of luxury with a lock and leave experience. So we're seeing a lot more downsizer buildings enter the market. I think we just did an analysis where 35% of the high-rise units in Houston are actually targeting more of a downsizer, and the remainder are that upper end young professional. So that's a product type that's coming into the market. A newer product type we also see is active adult, which is not ready for seniors housing, don't need a shot, but maybe my life circumstances have changed and I prefer to rent, but I want a big, heavy lifestyle programming as part of that. And that product type is entering the market. It's more like multifamily. It's not like seniors housing. But again, it's not a really big apartment community either. In Dallas, I'm sure you've worked on these, but those are 150. I think the sweet spot, according to Greystar, who's very big in this space, is 150 to 170 units.
John, any more questions come in yet?
Yep, there is. So it's kind of related here. This is actually from one of the architects that's on here. He says, with office conversions being a hot topic, what are some of the challenges architects face when converting existing buildings into multifamily developments?
Well, does the deal pencil is always the question. I mean, and And you just got a lot of problems with the depth of the units, how to make units work. And I think I wrote a good column on this, I don't know, last year, and certainly we've done a lot of due diligence on these. They often are failing to work because the numbers don't quite work. I mean, I've joked that the most likely way for redevelopment to occur is conversion by demolition for your suburban product. You have an office building that's maybe built from the 70s to the early 90s, maybe call center or those kind of things. It's all surface parked. Maybe it has a garage. We've done some where the garage is an asset and you build around it and do multifamily. So I think you have to think creatively, and sometimes the zoning tool really is required to make that work. Your traditional renovations are often going to require some sort of city incentives. You're going to have the public-private partnership to make those numbers work, John. I mean, it's what we're seeing. I mean, they're complicated.
They are complicated. We've worked on quite a few. Actually, Dallas is another good laboratory for that, believe it or not. But we've done quite a bit in Dallas, not so much in Austin, if any that I come to mind. Maybe Seaholm could be counted as one. And there's one that's now entered the market in Houston. Do them all the time in Philadelphia. Every building is old there. But there's a lot of obsolescence in those buildings that you have to underwrite to. And of course, also, creating new landing spaces for residents to enter. And, sometimes they're on one-way streets. And so there's all kinds of ingress, egress issues associated with that. If you're going to be a good sales center to sell or to manage and lease units. So there are a lot of things to think about. Parking in an obsolete office building, maybe, half a block down the way through a sky bridge, over and under, the Goonies. You feel like you're in a tunnel in some downtown communities, but we're working on them. We're seeing them. Some of them have historical tax credits that make the numbers work. We've got a couple in some smaller markets that we're talking with clients right now that are working through those. They can do a wonderful job, and they have a lot of positives as well. They usually have more elevators. They usually have great floor to ceiling windows. So there are a lot of things about them that can make them great lifestyle choices for those. They can be walking distance to arenas and football stadiums and things of that nature. So locationally, there's always some opportunity, but it's definitely a challenge and takes a lot of underwrite and a lot of push to get those to work.
Okay. There's one other question here. So you mentioned doing work in multiple cities across the country. With each municipality having unique permit requirements, how can Millrose experience working in these cities help developers navigate varying systems more efficiently?
I'll answer that, I guess. Well, one, we're already working in all those places, John, as you know. I mean, we've got playbooks for 100 and some odd cities. And I often try to tell clients, it's like maybe your 10th grade English teacher, that it couldn't be stapled. It had to be paper clipped. Cities are a little bit like that. And the ones we work in a lot, we understand, and some of them formatting really matters. Having it formatted properly makes it easier for the grading. And then the other thing is I've found in my career, people submit too many sheets. You don't have to submit more than the city needs to review. So understanding the more you give them creates more confusion and longer times for them. You want to submit the right thing the right way. And that's why now that we're doing things everywhere and have offices all over the country, that we're we've got people in those places that are experts and know what to do and when to do it. I mean, and then there's still, you need to have that trusted advisor that the architect, contractor, client can all call and ask why. And we know that answer.
Okay. Well, I think that will wrap it up for today. If there are any additional questions, please continue to send them in and we'll follow back up with you. But we'd like to thank you for your time and we appreciate your business.
Thank you.
Thanks. Feel free to reach out to me anytime.
Thanks. Bye.